In the last video, we added the UGUI text up here that would allow us to display the number of spheres collected. In this video, we're going to look at adding UI buttons, which are used for a lot of different things and very, very useful. And we want to look at how to build in some functionality with Playmaker. So first thing we're going to do is go back to our scene view, go to our canvas, and I'm going to get a decent view of this here. And we're going to add in a button. And for this video, we're going to keep it pretty simple. We're going to just add in a help button. So selecting my canvas, right clicking, coming down to UI, and I can add a button. Okay. So if I zoom in here a little bit, you can see the button that I have there. Very cleverly labeled button, pretty ugly box there. So since this is just a help button, having a hard time selecting that one. I'm gonna grab it and just put it up here in the top left corner. And zoom in a little bit here. I might resize this a little bit, get something like that. Now let's look at here in our hierarchy with what we have. So we've created a button, and you can see that it's got a child on it. Our inspector. The button, it's got a bunch of different components on it. It's got an image component on it, and so this lovely 1990s button style is the default option here. We got some colors, some materials, some other options here we can look at later. We also have this button component, and this is just a script that can be added to any UI element. And you've got a bunch of different options here. So you got a transition. By default, it's color tint. And so what this means is the tint of this button is going to change depending on what you do. So the normal color, just white. So when you're not interacting with the button, if you've highlighted it, so that's in general, that's when you have the mouse over it, it'll tint a little bit. Pressed color and then disabled color. You can disable the button by clicking interactable. Sometimes you want to tell the player that, hey, you can't click on this right now. That's what that option's about. You got a fade duration here. This is how long these transitions take. This navigation, once you get multiple buttons going on, this is the control of what button comes next. In a lot of programs, if you hit tab, you go to the next button or the next field. If you're going to build a game with a controller, this navigation would be or could be very important, using arrow keys or the digital pad to control which button you're going to select. So those can be pretty important. Right. Also down here, the on-click option. This is mostly used for really basic interactions. We can show two ways to today to toggle our help option. One way would be to use this on-click. We'll get there later. All right. The child here is the text. So any text that you want inside the button is part of this child. Now, you don't have to have this object here, but in this case, it's helpful, pun intended. So I'm going to size that up. In this case, I am going to use the best fit option, just kind of size it up. And again, now if I look at my game view, I've got my help button. It's pretty ugly, but it's there. Okay, so what we want this button to do, or what I'm going to design this button to do, is just display some help text. Let's let the player know how to play the game. So before we get into the Playmaker action for that, let's create the help text. And we're going to do that a little bit more complex than the last text option, because that has no background. It can be a little hard to read. So I'm going to click on Canvas, right click, and I'm going to go to UI, and I'm going to add in a panel right here. Now, a panel is just an image, and it covers the entire screen, which seems to be the main difference between it and choosing a image of itself. It's also a little set to have some transparency here. So what I'm going to do is resize this down, and this is going to be kind of the panel, the window for our help text. So maybe I'm going to center this one here. Okay. And I'm going to rename this help text just to help myself stay organized. And then in here, I'm going to add a child that is a text option. Okay. And again, I'm going to kind of resize this one to fit however I want. So let's, I don't know, you can help text, press WASD to move, space to jump, collect spheres to make, annoying noises. Okay. Doesn't really matter. So what we're gonna do here, I'm gonna just size this up here. So again, it looks kind of readable. Maybe center it, and such things, okay? Now, you can see here that I was able to do line separations. What I can't do in Unity's default text is change the size of individual elements. If I select this help text here and try to change its size, I change the size of everything in that text box. So maybe this isn't what I want. Maybe I want a heading here. Okay, so let's add another text element here. And I can size that up here. And maybe this is what's going to say help text. Do some best fit. Maybe make that bigger. Center it. And then this text here is just going to be that. So I could do something like that. Maybe we could change the color of this a little bit. I don't know. I don't know why it would be red. Let's make it blue. A little bit more pleasant. Okay. And you can build up lots of items or lots of structure here in your help text. Okay. So there we go. We got our help text up. It's not particularly helpful, but it gets the point across. So now what we want to be able to do is when we click on this help button, it's going to toggle this panel on and off. We could also build a close button in here. Maybe we can do that as well. But our primary goal here is to get this button, when I press it, toggles the state of this on and off. Okay, so let's go to this button here, and I'm just going to minimize these components just so we can see a little bit better on the rect transform as well. I'm going to add a FSM state, or FSM to this object here. I'm going to call this help toggle and edit it, and we're going to come into here. So what we need here is a few things. We need to have something that's listening for this button. And in order to do that, we're going to have to return to our ecosystem browser again. So go back to Playmaker, add-ons, ecosystem browser. And so again, what we want is a UGUI, and we want a button. And in this case, I know what we're looking for, so I'm going to search for on click. All right. And because what we want is when we click on this button, we want something to happen. In this case, we want an event to happen. And so this action that shows up here, the UGUI button on click event, is what we want. So press get, we download it, Unity will compile. Okay. Again, I'm going to close my ecosystem and go to actions, and let's search for UGUI. And you'll see that we've got this new action here. So let's click on that and look at the preview a little bit and see what we got here. So we got a game object, so that's going to allow us to choose which button we're listening to, and we're going to send an event. And this is just a Playmaker event, so it's nice and simple. All it's going to do is move our Playmaker to the next state. So what we need is this listener state, and then a second state to do that action. So let's create a second state, and this is going to be called toggle help window. And this original state is just going to be listen for click. Okay, so we got our two states. And we're gonna need some events. So let's call one clicked. And another one, actually we can use a default event in there. So let's add this transition, clicked. And here we're gonna have just a transition finished. We can use the built-in one, and we're gonna go back and forth like that. Okay, so we're going to listen for a click, and when we've done that, we're going to go to toggle our help window. We're going to do some stuff and then come back and listen for another click. Okay, so click on the listen for click state, and we're going to add this new action, the on click event. Okay, we've added that in there, and since we've added this FSM to the button, it is automatically listening to the button that's on the owner. If you added it to a different object, like we did with the counter, you can specify game object and drag and drop the button object into it. That will work as well. And that's good if you're trying to listen to multiple buttons and such things. So we'll leave it like that for now. And then when this gets clicked, we want to send the event of clicked. And that's just going to move us to this state and back. Okay. So in here, this is what we need to control here. So we need to, in this state, determine whether our help text is on, and if it is, we're going to toggle it off. And so that's what we'll be doing next. Okay, so now that we've got this built, we need to start building up the logic to turn on and off our help text. And there's multiple ways to do this. One way to do this is to have a Boolean that's gonna track whether this help text is on. And a Boolean is just a true or false. So let's go into our variables and create a new variable. Help text is on. And make sure we choose the variable type of Boolean and add that in. Okay. So we're going to start with our Boolean, or with our help text off, as most games would do. So we're just going to assume that that's going to happen. So our variable is turned off. Okay, you can see it's set at false. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do, we need to flip that Boolean. We need to make it true. Okay, so if I go to my action browser and search bool, short for Boolean, we can find this option here, bool flip. Add that in, and we're going to flip this value. So that means every time we come to the state, we're just going to change it. So it's going to go true, false, true, false, true, false, which is what we want with our help text. We want it to toggle on and off. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to grab our help text here and drag and drop it directly into our state. And we're going to get this little context menu. We want to choose game object, go down to game object again, and then we want to activate the game object. Okay, so activate the game object is just a way to turn the game object on and off. And by default here, this activate is turned on. Okay, but we don't want to manually tell whether it's on or off. We want to do it using this variable. So we're going to click this equals here, and that's going to allow us to choose a variable. And we're going to be able to set it to the value of this help text is on. Okay, and that's it. So let's check and see if this works. Again, since we assumed that our help text is off to start the game, let's turn that off. And let's push play and see what happens. So we've got our, oh, look at that. We've got two buttons on top of each other. I forgot about our button here. So if we click on our help text pops up. It also changes us to nighttime. So let's go ahead and move that button. Let's just move it over here so it's not overlapping. Push play. And that's going to bring up our help text. Now, the transparency is not so great. We can't see it very well. We can change that. But our help button is now toggling our help text on and off. So there you go. We've created a button that will toggle our help text on and off. We could be a little bit more sophisticated with this one. Be nice maybe to have a button on our help text that would also close this down instead of having to come back up to the same button. So let's go ahead and do that. And that's going to require a little bit of work in Playmaker as well. So let's go to our scene view, go to our help text panel, make sure you've got it turned on, and we're going to add a button as a child. Okay. You can now see these yellow lines that all of a sudden appeared. These are the navigation that I was talking about earlier. So I'm going to drag this button down here and size it up. Okay. So that it kind of fits there. I might change this text. There we go. And we got our button down here. I'm going to open up the little text components and we'll call it close window. Something like that. Close window, and maybe we'll change the color of this. Close windows are often, I don't know, a little red. Now the text is a little hard to read, so let's change the color of that to something closer to white. There we go. We've got a close button. Again, it's kind of got that ugly 1990s shape to it. And again, you can change that by changing this source image here. I often just use a simple white square. It works pretty well, and then you can tint it and color it however you like. Okay, so we've got this close window, and right now, one option would be to use this on-click feature down here. So if I open this up, let me show you how this works. I can open, hit the plus, and I get some options here. And what I can do is drag an object into this slot here. And then it's going to ask for some functions here to run. It's going to call a function. Now, if you have scripts that are attached to this, if you're coding, you could select a public function from this. In this case, since we're using Playmaker, that's not going to work. But I can go to game object, and you'll notice down here there's a set active. And I'm going to leave that Boolean unchecked. So we can see what happens there. I can open this up. I can close that window. I can use this to open it up again. But if I click on that now, I actually have to click twice. So if I close this window with this button, I have to click twice on the help button to get it to open. And the reason is that this help button doesn't actually know if this thing is open. It's just looking at that Boolean. And this button here isn't looking at that Boolean at all. So this works, but it's a little clumsy. And let's see if we can get these two buttons to work together and cooperate a little bit better. So let's go back to our button object here in the on-click. Select, make sure you select it. It's a little tough. And hit the minus and get rid of that thing. I find that trying to select the action there is a little clunky. So what we want to do is this button here actually needs to do the same thing that this button is doing. Now to do that, we could create a new FSM down here on this button. And that would work, that'd be fine. Or we can be a little bit lazier, a little bit more clever, and we can copy the FSM from this original help button down onto our new close window button, since it's doing the exact same thing. So let's do that. We're gonna make sure you've selected the toggle help button, and then go over to the FSM, the little gear, and we're gonna copy component. Go down to your close window button, and select another gear, and we're gonna paste component as new. If you happen to select the gear down here by your shader, you'll get different options. So go to a component and paste component as new. All right, and there we go. We've got our FSM on our button. So let's see what happens. Okay, so it's open. I can push that and it closes. I can push this and it opens. But you might notice that I'm clicking more than once. And so it works, but it's not real awesome. And the reason that's happening is because these buttons aren't actually looking at the state of this help panel. They're looking at a Boolean, and they're not communicating to each other. So one thinks it's off, the other thinks it's on. And so you have to double click. And so an easy way to fix that is to change that Boolean to be a global Boolean. So go back into Playmaker and go to your variables. And we're going to go to global variable down here. And we're going to create a new variable. Help text is on, and I'm going to call it _global. Make sure it's a Boolean, and then add that to our FSM. Okay. Now, at the same time, I'm going to delete this. Did that get added? I don't feel like that added. Yep, that did add. Okay. At the same time, we're going to delete this local Boolean. Delete that. It's going to give me a little warning. Yep, deleted it. And we're going to come over here to our toggle help window. And we've deleted that local Boolean, so we need to select the global one. Like that. So we did that for our close window. And now we need to do the same thing over here at the toggle help, the first button. So go to variables, and I'm going to delete that Boolean. Again, it gives me the warning. I don't need to recreate the global because it's global. It's already been created. So go to state, Boolean, global, help text, activate, help text, something like that. Okay. So we've gotten rid of the local Boolean. We're just using the global Boolean. Let's see what happens here. So I can close my window. I do have to click twice here, and I can explain why. Click twice there, help. Now we're toggling. It's working nicely. Now the reason I had to click twice here was because we made the assumption that the help text was off to start the game. So we can turn our help text off, try again, and I just click once on either button, and it works great. So there you go. We've added a little bit of sophistication to our UI. It still doesn't look great, but that's okay. We've got the functionality, and we're able to open up a help text and close the help text. So hope that was helpful. Thanks for joining, and hope to see you next time.